luncheon keynote, Ana Maria Arevalo Gosen was born in Venezuela, and as of 2009, because of the Venezuelan crisis, she has been living in France. She lived and studied in the city of Toulouse for 4 years, and she studied both political science and photography. She has won quite a number of awards for her photography, and her photography has appeared in the New York Times, amongst other places, including the Sunday Art section and Reuters, where her very compelling photographs of the human rights situations in Venezuela has caught everybody's attention. Accolades include the nomination for the Jupe Swart Masterclass, and the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting made her a travel grantee. She is the 2018 Woman and Photography for Nikon grantee, and a series of other awards, and her work is very compelling, and we're very delighted to have an artist like Ana Maria speak to us about the human rights situation and the use of her art to promote that, our understanding of that. Thank you very much.
Hi. Thank you, Lisa, for the presentation and inviting me to present my work here. The world's technology is expanding faster than ever. These technologies allow us to perceive the world with innovative points of view. With drones, we can see from a bird's eye perspective the droughts in Australia or the melting ice of the poles. With virtual reality, we can immerse ourselves in the daily life of Syrian refugees inside their camps. Through a glimpse from their lives, we can feel and learn from their experience. When Joan Fontcuberta, a photographer and historian in the field of photography, was asked in the 90s to give his opinion about including a small photographic camera inside a phone, his answer was that the idea seemed like a solemn stupidity. He was wrong. Everybody in this room has cameras in their phones. We are living in the era of the democratization of the image. The image is not anymore the creation of magicians, artists, or professionals in the field. Everyone produces images spontaneously as a form to socialize. The difference between photographers and photojournalists is the why we create these images. Through images, photojournalists want to create an impact. Photography is for us, photojournalists, the vehicle to satisfy our curiosity, and by doing so, we can put the spectator on the skin of who we are photographing. Through the creation of powerful stories, we advocate for minorities, we give visibility to injustices, we spend time speaking to the disadvantaged, and we become witnesses of the hopelessness. What we ultimately want with our work is bring awareness about certain issues. We want to create change, we want to inspire, and we want to improve the human condition. In 2017, I went back to Venezuela after 3.5 years without coming back home. 3.5 years without going back to Venezuela, in the middle of the crisis that the country is going through, seemed like an eternity. The prices had skyrocketed, the people's spirits for a better future were frustrated, and the infrastructure was severely deteriorated. One day, I was talking to a journalist friend on how could I approach the crisis photographically. She talked to me about the people that were detained and taken to pretrial detention. A detention center is a place where you're supposed to be held a maximum of 45 days. But the country's crisis have rendered this notion a memory. I was in shock to learn that, for example, some places were so overcrowded that female detainees were getting pregnant because they were mixed with the male detainees. This is the first female detainee that I've ever met. She was 27 years old and 7 months pregnant. Female detainees in the center of detention where she was being held was mixed with the male detainees. That is how she became pregnant in detention. The reason why she was in the hospital was because she sat in an static position all day long. She was in great amount of stress, and she did not have a clean toilet to go to. The toilet, she explained, was a shared hold inside the same cell where she was being held. These factors led her to present infections and loss of placenta, a life-threatening complication that can end up in the death of both mother and the baby. Soon after meeting her, we visited a detention center in Valencia, the third most populated city in Venezuela. At the moment of my visit, this center of detention had 5 cells, including one for the female detainees. Before, the women used to share this space with the male detainees. The local police had to close their investigation office and turn it into an improvised dungeon, that's how they call the cells, for the women. A group of 11 women, including a 21-year-old in her 8th month of pregnancy, were sharing this space. The air inside was suffocating. They only had one small window to let the air come in, and they shared skinny mattresses to sleep on the floor. The bathroom was also an improvised facility. It was located in the backyard of the police station. Open-aired, with carton walls, a toilet for everyone to share was in this place. They took their showers next to the field toilet. The water had to be brought by themselves from a pipe on the other side of the backyard. These women did not know when they were going to move on to trial. They did not know if they were going to be released. They did not know their lawyers. Some of them have been waiting for trial for years. After that day, I felt ashamed that I did not know about the dreadful realities of these women. So many of their human rights were being violated. They are serving an anticipated conviction regardless of their crime committed or their culpability. They are forced to wait for a process that could last for years. It enraged me also that so many Venezuelans were completely disconnected from this reality. This is not something that we're talking about. That is why I came to the decision of pursuing a project about the women in pretrial detention. It is a body of work that gives evidence of one of the root causes of the Venezuelan crisis. The criminal justice system does not work equally for everybody. On the contrary, it takes away the rights of the poorest and most vulnerable members of the society, the women. None of the persons that you will see in this presentation come from a middle or high-class group. In Venezuela, if you're rich and guilty, you will not go in the system, as if you're corrupt but part of the government. It is a system that bends towards wealth and the political sphere. Between 2017 and 2019, I visited 2 state prisons and 10 of the 500 detention centers around the country. I interviewed around 100 women. These places all act as a repository for criminals. According to the Venezuelan Observatory of Prisons, between 2017 and 2018, the rate of injured and dead prisoners had augmented in 137%. These places do not have the capacity or the appropriate facilities to withhold prisoners. As a consequence, people get sick or die from diseases, sometimes infectious. Tuberculosis, malnutrition, AIDS, scabies, or hepatitis, to name a few. This is one of the cells of the male cells in the center of detention in Valencia that I mentioned before. It is very overcrowded. These men are suffering from severe malnutrition, scabies, and tuberculosis. This is where they keep the women in a center of detention in Guatire, a city near Caracas. You could hear water running from one side to the other, like a stream inside a cell. This is the male cells of a center of detention in Guarenas, a city near Caracas. There were hundreds of flies around me and a smell that I can only describe as rotten food. The woman in the yellow shirt is Roxana. She has a lot of health and psychological problems. She has AIDS and severes from drug addiction. This cost her a liver abscess that almost took her life recently before I met her. She was in tremendous amount of pain and did not receive any medical attention. There is a spirit of hopelessness inside these places. Some of the women are abandoned by their families once detained, or they are detained far away from home, which makes it really hard for the family to visit. Making it through this experience requires family on the outside, because they depend on their families to bring them food and water every day. Otherwise, they will have to count on the other inmates to share it with them or die from hunger. This is the food that 7 women were going to share as a dinner. Several of these women are mothers. Betania gave birth while being on detention. She could not keep her newborn with her. She received a humanitarian measure that allowed her to breastfeed her child whenever the caretaker could bring it to her. But this did not happen very often. The caretaker was the grandmother from the father's side. The father of the child was also in prison. The grandmother had to divide her time between work and visitations to both Betania and her son, because as I explained before, she is the responsible of bringing food to both of them. Betania could not produce milk to breastfeed. She was anemic, depressed, and very skinny. These pictures were taken in 2017. In 2019, I followed up on the grandmother. Her son had died in prison for a purple fever. Betania was in Colombia looking for better opportunities, and the grandmother still kept the baby. They spend their days in a deranged inactivity. There are no programs or space to move. According to the Venezuelan Observatory of Prisons, the overcrowding is rated as critical above 40%. In Venezuela, the overcrowding is 125%. Chinatown is the detention center that holds most female detainees in Caracas. The population varies from 60 to 100. This place is dark, for there is no natural light coming inside, and hope is elusive. The female cells are divided in 2. This section is so overcrowded, there is no space to walk around. There are pregnant women being held in here. They hang their belongings on the perimeter of the prison. This seems to warn that the owners are only passing through. This section is for las fresas, the strawberries. Only the women who can afford to pay whatever the police is asking for, usually in US dollars, is allowed to stay here. They have beds, TVs, phone, and a kitchen. Asking to a 21-year-old detainee on her feelings about the conditions of her detention, she said to me, "This situation is not helping anybody. When we get out of here, if we do, we will be worse people than we were before prison." She was waiting for her trial for 2 years. This cage is where they keep 7 male detainees in a center of detention in Naguanagua. According to a guard, one of the prisoners had committed suicide inside by hanging. In La Yaguara, women have to go to a toilet in a bucket in front of other inmates. Privacy is something that you can only dream of. In here, they keep underage prisoners. Janeidi is 17 years old. Her mother was charged or blackmailed by the police for her visitation. Or Heini. She also goes by the name of 38, like the caliber of the gun tattooed on her leg. She was 17 years old when I met her, and she was accused of homicide. La Chiquita, the little one, was just 15 years old. They share the space with elderly prisoners that sleep on the floor, but also with prisoners that have mental problems, as severe drug addiction, and the space is very cramped, and at times it can get very violent. According to the Venezuelan Observatory of Prisons, 63% of the prisoners in Venezuela are still waiting for trial. That is more than half than the total amount of the population throughout the country, the incarcerated population throughout the country. Women that are inside for political reasons are the ones that suffer the most from procedural delay. In January 2018, the first woman detained under the abetting of hate law was Erika Palacios. She was protesting against the severe food shortages. Talking to her, she asked me, how can someone be detained for hating when hate is just a feeling? This law criminalizes protest against the government. She was released after 6 months. The process for trial can, as I mentioned, last for long periods of time. And the prisoners start to make the place look more like a home. Like these wish kisses, or the message, "Mother, I miss you so much," printed on the walls. We have seen this center before. It is the one in Valencia that I visited for the first time. 1 year after my first visit to the center, they have filled the walls with decoration. Noble hearts, messages expressing their feelings such as, "I don't expect anyone to believe me because I believe in no one," and Maluma, their favorite reggaeton singer. In Venezuela, there are only 4 reclusion centers exclusive for the female population, which according to the ONG, a window to freedom is 3,000. But there are no official data. In December 2018, I visited 2 of these prisons in Maracaibo. They are what the penitentiary system calls a regime prison. It is the place where most of the sentenced population goes. Their motto is "Reformation of the New Woman," which means that they are militarized. Every time I entered a room, they stood up and made a salutation that ended up saying, "Independencia y patria socialista, viviremos y venceremos, Chávez vive, la lucha sigue," which translates to "Independence and socialist fatherland, we will live and we will win, Chávez lives, the fight continues." This is the salutation that the military says since the 21st century socialism was installed in Venezuela. Those 2 prisons were not overcrowded. In fact, there was space for other women to be there. They have uniforms, space to sleep, programs of education, sports, and food. They do not have the right for visitations or calls. Talking to some of the women, they accepted that they declared themselves guilty in order to accelerate the process and get transferred from a center of detention to here. Being able to make these pictures was not an easy task. The intimacy I was looking for was only possible if I could get inside a cell, the guards would be gone, and we could speak freely. They expressed how their lives had not been easy. When she was 15, her father gave her as a birthday present a gun. He said to her, "Here, so you don't have to depend on any man in your life." There are stories of abuse in the family or coercion by men to commit a crime. The most common reason of their detentions were drug-related or robbery. But there are also cases of extortion, homicide, infanticide, illegal possession of weapons, or kidnapping. She was declared guilty of infanticide. She was 4 months pregnant. The father of the unborn baby had committed suicide. She was not transferred to a state prison because other inmates punished this type of crime. Do you think this woman should be in a detention center? Shouldn't she be receiving some psychological help? What is going to happen to the baby when it's born? This is an imprisoned woman kissing her daughter. At the time, she was feared for her violent behavior towards the others. She was receiving medication at the time, but she said that it did not work. Another unattended but psychological problem is self-mutilation. The reason of these scars are self-inflicted wounds. Guilt, shame, or fear of being in prison were some of the reasons that they self-harmed. None of the guards is prepared to provide them help. They are in fact making it worse. This is Grecia. Her name, given by the police, was La Rajada, the cracked, because of the numerous scars she had all over her body from self-harm or from fights. Her self-mutilations were caused when she consumed drugs or was drunk on isopropyl alcohol. She is the mother of 10 children. She was accused of drug possession, and this was 24 hours after her detention. She was scared, lost, and freaking out. For transgender detainees, it is also a living nightmare. In Valencia, they are treated as male detainees, which means that they have to wait for trial inside the male cell. They are constantly raped, beaten, and abused. Inside the same detention center, I met Jennifer. She has been waiting for trial for 1 year and 5 months. Conjugal visits are forbidden for the female population, but Jennifer met someone on the inside. They had intercourse in the main entrance of the police station and became pregnant. The father of the child is accused of homicide. The food that they eat comes from the boyfriend's family. They, however, do not eat every day. She was coming back from a doctor's visit because she presented infections and loss of placenta. Again, what will happen to the baby when it's born? The only group that I have ever encountered to pay attention to the prisoners are the Evangelists. Sometimes they go and preach for them, or they go in groups and prepare micro pieces of theaters where they play a modern passage of the Bible, usually leaving a positive message. It can be forgiveness, hope, respect, acceptance of the other. Usually, they are followed by a speech of a priest and a rehabilitated ex-convict that tells his or her story. The women usually pray with power and courage. They cry in desperation or guilt or just to let off steam. A lot of them puts their path in God's will. The system fails them, so faith is what remains. Venezuela is known for their beautiful women and how we are always trying to take care of our looks. In a detention center, that is no exception. They like to fix their hair and put on makeup even if they don't have mirrors. Their beauty tools are their benefits given by the police. This fact can act as a double-edged sword because everything that is given can be also taken away. One day I spent so much time with them that when I yelled to the guard to open up the door and let me leave, he didn't come. He forgot I was there. I yelled, he didn't come. So I tried to stay calm and shoot them while they were putting on makeup. Those intimate moments arrived when they realized I was comfortable with them. It was, however, not so dramatic. The guards came a while later and opened the door for me. I was never afraid around them, and we always treated each other with respect. That is the base to make a story close, powerful, and intimate. I let myself feel vulnerable, empathic, and honest. The honesty helped me connect with them. This connection enabled an intimacy that resonated in the images created. The vulnerability translated into my photography. It gave me a sense of purpose, to go beyond the picture, to challenge injustice. I wish to pursue this project until the situation changes. I want to visit more centers and interview more women. Improvements for the incarcerated will not happen during this government. It is too corrupt and they don't care. But we, the Venezuelan and Latin American society, must find the bravery to learn about this project, about the suffering of the incarcerated population. I do believe, though, that this bloody, cruel dictatorship will fall, and it will give us at last the opportunity to turn the country around. As soon as this happens, a plan for a better democratic future will be put in place. I hope these images can inspire our politicians to put in place a plan to improve the general conditions of the criminal justice system, to build new infrastructures, to provide the incarcerated food, water, and medical attention. It is necessary to enable an ecosystem where they feel safe and are able to rehabilitate. This will make the future generations a stronger, safer, and less violent society. Thank you. I have some minutes for questions. I hope that you have some. Yeah, just stand up and say whatever you want to ask. Yeah, go ahead. Can you stand here so everyone can listen? Or yeah, okay.
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, congratulations. These pictures are simply so eloquent and
Thank you.
disturbing but necessary. I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on how you gained access to these places.
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a tricky question because, yeah, photojournalists have to have this kind of way to persuade people. I was lucky that I found police officers that are completely against the government and completely against how the system is working for them, especially because they are not used to this. It is a problem that developed in 2017 when the penitentiary system separated the detention centers and the state prisons. Iris Varela, the minister of the penitentiary system, said that only when you have gone to trial and sentenced guilty, you can or be released if you're sentenced not guilty, or to go into the state prisons that I showed you. So it is kind of a new way that the centers of detentions are working, and it's getting very overcrowded, and the procedural delay cannot catch up, and the system cannot catch up with the amount of prisoners that are receiving, and the police officers do not know how to handle this. So I was actually lucky to talk to the right people and persuade them to let me in, and I've been working on this for 3 years now, and the relationship with the authorities have developed, and they trust me, and that's how I did it. Yes?
I have 2 questions for you. So, from what you just said, it seems like a lot of innocent people are being held, in these centers. Is that what you're saying? A lot of innocent people, because if
yes.
all are waiting for trial,
yes,
I guess,
That's right, yes. I mean, they have not gone to trial, so the law says that you are innocent until proven the contrary, but if you're not going to trial, there is no way that the authorities know about this if they don't investigate every case. So yes, of course there are guilty prisoners, yes.
My second question is, have you shared your information with the Guaidó government to be included in the Plan País, or somehow is that something you're planning to do, to share your information with them, because something has to be done?
Yes. I think Guaidó was in a meeting with this ONG that I mentioned, A Window to Freedom. And so some steps have been taken already, and I think the A Window for Freedom spoke in the name of the incarcerated population. But I mean, yes, if a new government is put in place, I will be more than glad to share it with them and to make improvements for them. Yeah, I have not talked to them though. I have not make contact with them. Other questions?
Could you talk a little bit about the conversations you had with the women photographed, and what kind of awareness they had of your reasons for being there and your projects, and how they felt about having their images circulated for these reasons?
Okay. So what I basically did was first when I had the access, I got inside the cells, and I didn't put out my camera. I talked to them and I explained that I was a photographer, and that I was a photojournalist, and that I wanted to take pictures and interview the women that wanted to. Of course, some of the women didn't want to have their image taken, and I didn't do it. And so I spent, as I said, a lot of time with them inside the cell, talking to them and interviewing them. And when I felt that it was comfortable for me and for them to put out the camera and start shooting, I would just do that for for sometimes. Of course, at the beginning, they are looking at the camera. If you see the pictures, they are looking at the camera. Some of them are like very skeptical of what I'm doing. But then at what time? Yes, okay, I'll put it. So, at some point, they start to get comfortable with the idea, and I keep on going and keep on going. So I visit this center of detention in Valencia, for example, I don't know, maybe 5 times, and La Yaguara I went, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, way more, I don't know, maybe 10 times. And so I developed a trust relationship with them. So sometimes when I got there after a little while, one of the prisoners that was still there for years, they would say, "Oh, this is Anna. No, she's okay. Don't worry." And then I come in, and it was kind of easy. With the years, it gets easier to get in and to have the trust for them so I could be able to take the pictures. And I wanted to say something else. What else? I don't know. If I remember, I'll tell you. But yeah, that's how I did it. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to all the sponsors and Lisa and everyone that made this project possible. Thank you.